Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at Accelerate Chapter 2. In the first video we took a look at Chapter 1 and we talked about the need for businesses to be able to deliver value quickly in small batches so that they can have quickly delight customers, stay ahead of competitors, engage in organizational learning. And then we talked about the need for the technological transformation that was necessary to make that happen. I'm talking specifically about software development here. And then they talked about the ways that we can potentially measure that, see how we're doing in that technological transformation to be able to get to those quick and easy deliveries. And there were two models presented. One was a maturity model, the other one was a capability model. In this chapter, it introduces a sort of a different alternative to this capabilities model, which measures its continuous improvement, dynamic, it's outcome-based, and the contrast was with this idea of measuring productivity. Measuring productivity would be like measuring lines of code or team utilization, that kind of a thing. And they said really for the purposes of understanding our technological transformation, productivity is really not the best thing to measure. First of all, it's not great because it is output-based compared to the outcome-based capabilities model. In other words, we want a metric that's going to see not just like how much did we do, but what are the outcomes of the things that we did. Secondly, the problem with productivity ways of measuring is that they are sort of local or individual, sort of an individual team or an individual could sort of game the system in a way that actually hurts the overall system of the organization, whereas capability models are intended to be, and the metrics we're driving for here are intended to be global or team-oriented. Like, think about the whole system. How's the whole system working? So what are we going to measure? And again, this was hinted at the end of Chapter 1, and now we see it spelled out in Chapter 2. It's going to be measuring primarily delivery, tempo, and stability. Tempo and stability. And this breaks down into four things. So the first one is lead time. Now you can take a look at lead time as like the whole system of lead time, which is when there's a customer request until when it's delivered to the customer. The book breaks that down into design and delivery, or design and implementation. It talks about the design is can be very fuzzy. It can be a very like fuzzy lead time. So what we're sort of interested in is the implementation or the delivery time that it takes. And what they say is what they're really asking companies to measure in their research was the time it took from code being committed to code successfully running in a production environment. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about measuring lead time. It's this delivery time. This can actually be broken down in a couple more ways that I've found in other research or in other documentation, but this is how it's described in Chapter 2 of Accelerate. The next one then is deployment frequency. That's what they're measuring. But really what they say is that deployment frequency is a proxy for measuring batch size. They say batch size is really important. There's a quote here: reducing batch sizes reduces cycle times and variability in flow, accelerates feedback, reduces risk and overhead, improves efficiency, increases motivation and urgency, and reduces cost and schedule growth. So what they see batch size as a really key concept. But in software development, batch size is sort of too fuzzy of a thing to really be able to calculate. And so the proxy then is deployment frequency. If you are deploying frequently, it means your batch sizes are small to be able to deploy frequently. The next one they talk about is mean time to restore. Assuming, in a perfect world, everything goes right. In the real world, things go wrong, and we need to see how quickly the team can right itself, can basically get back to delivering quality, good stuff to their customers. And then the fourth one here is the change failure percentage, which can also be a little bit fuzzy, but they define it as something that results in like degraded service, especially things that require a hot fix, a rollback, or a fix forward. Now you notice these first two, lead time and deployment frequency, they measure the release tempo, the delivery tempo, and mean time to restore and change failure rate are measures of release stability. Now what they did is once they had these categories and an ability to measure these, they had a lot of different businesses that they were working with to measure this. They did some research and they did some analysis based on the research. The first thing that they found is they did some cluster analysis, and they discovered that these measures were statistically significant to produce different categories, and they had 3 categories: high, medium, and low performers. All 4 of the measures were good classifiers, and in higher performers, there was no trade-off between tempo and stability. You could imagine a scenario where, a business delivers quickly, fast, and that causes the quality to suffer. In the high-performing group, that wasn't the case. You could have your cake and eat it too. But in low performers that tried to artificially increase tempo, they did see a step back in stability. They seemed to lose ground there. And the theory for that was that they tried to increase tempo without having the necessary capabilities, like test automation, to be able to do it in the right way. And then they said, what do these... So this just allowed them to classify the different organizations. But then they said, does it make a difference for organizational success? Does delivery capability lead to organizational success? And here's what they found. They found that high-performing organizations were consistently twice as likely to exceed profitability, market share, and productivity goals as low performers. So it wasn't just a benefit to the engineering part of the organization, but it was a benefit to the organization as a whole. All right, and that's what they covered in Chapter 2. In Chapter 3, we'll take a look at the role that organizational culture plays in all of this.